Good afternoon. Thank you guys for tuning in to watch the COVID-19 relief funding still available panel. My name is Darian Scott with the Chattanooga Area Chamber of Commerce. Moderating with me, I have Mark Franklin with the Chattanooga Business Elite. Mark, go ahead.
Hey everyone, how you guys doing out there? It's a pleasure to be a part of this panel. My name is Mark Franklin, local business owner, and I am a board member for Chattanooga Business Elite, bringing community awareness to what's going on as far as minority businesses and collective businesses that's in the Chattanooga area. We got a great panel today on the topic of COVID relief funding still available. This is a what you would call possibly a part two of what Chattanooga Business Elite did in cooperation with Chamber of Commerce with Darian Scott. We had a great panel, and I believe we have Marcus Shaw, one of our panelists. I'll take it to Marcus so he can introduce himself to all of our guests and viewers.
Mark, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this second part of a really important conversation. I am the CEO of CoLab. We are an entrepreneurship and small business center based in the Edney Innovation Center downtown, and we've been working with businesses throughout Chattanooga to have them understand how to apply for PPP, what are some of the constraints around PPP, and connecting them with banks like TVFCU and others in the city that have PPP funds available.
Marcus Johnson, you can go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
All right, thanks a lot, Darian. Good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot for allowing TVFCU to be a part of this discussion. My name is Marcus Johnson. I'm a small business and commercial lender with Tennessee Valley Federal Credit Union. And we have been engaging in the PPP loan process since the very beginning, helping our members from across our 13 county footprint area to access these PPP loan funds.
All right, and Autumn, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Everybody, I'm Autumn Witt Boyd. I'm a local attorney and have been helping our clients and also just spreading the word about some of the different funding options available under the different programs and helping people figure them out.
Okay. If you are listening or viewing this, keep in mind you can put questions in the Q&A. We will be asking more questions to the panel. But first, we want to go straight in and kind of kick it off with one of the main questions. We know that, I directed to Marcus Johnson from TVFCU. We know that funding is still available. And as we discussed earlier this month, it was $130 billion still available. I know the state is set to release $200 million. Besides that, is there any more funding available, and how do people apply for that funding?
Yeah, so, to your point, the two major funding sources right now are, of course, the PPP. There's roughly about $130 billion remaining. My opinion is that chances are the program will expire before the loan funds actually run out. We've noticed in this second round of funding that the funds weren't depleted as quickly, which is a good thing. So there's plenty of money left, plenty of opportunity there to access some of those funds that are available right now through the PPP. With regard to the state's program, that's about $200 million. They have not released any official word just yet on what the process is going to be in order for small businesses across the state to access those funds. So far, what they have said is that there may not be an application process. They're going to take current revenue and sales data that's already at the state's in the state's database and kind of use that to determine how small businesses will qualify or how much money small businesses will be able to access. So there may not be an application process. It may just be you log on to your banking online and see some money from the state, but I'm sure there's more to come on that, but they hadn't released too many details as of this point.
So Marcus Johnson, I know there's a few Marcuses in our group, so we're gonna
Big Marcus, little Marcus.
Right. So for some of our viewers and people that we just want to make sure you're clear. So this is something that is similar to the stimulus package that came out some months before, that was delegated to just average citizens with an household income, but this is more geared toward the business owners, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the PPP loan program actually came from the CARES Act. So the $2 trillion program that was put in place, the PPP funds were carved out of that. So round one was about $350 billion. And then round two was another 310 or 320, give or take. And so, yeah, to your point, this stimulus was directed specifically to small business owners, both self-employed 1099 contractors and other small businesses with at least one employee. Yes.
Wow.
Gotcha.
So basically, it comes down to a small businesses having their ducks in a row to be able to be considered for that type of grant or loan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Paperwork and having all of your financials in order is key to accessing these monies through the PPP program. The rules have changed a ton. I'm sure Autumn can appreciate that. I think we counted from the time the program kicked off, which was April 2nd, within the first 3 weeks or so, we counted about 110, 115 different rule changes. So it's been challenging for small business owners, across the country, but particularly here locally, to keep up with all of the requirements to access these funds. But yeah, definitely having your financials in order, specifically your 2019 tax returns. I know that the deadline had been kicked out to July 15th, but the way you access funds now is you have to have at the very least your Schedule C. And typically, you're going to get your Schedule C once you file your tax returns. However, what the Treasury did say is that if you haven't filed your tax returns, then at minimum you'd have to provide a Schedule C. And so, we've run into situations where, small business owners didn't have it, or they were waiting to have their taxes prepared. And that has just kind of limited some folks from being able to access the funds quickly. But again, thankfully, there's still about $130 billion of monies out there with about 14 days left. So there's still some opportunity. So I would encourage small business owners who really want to access these funds, if you haven't gotten with your CPA just yet, to do that, get those documents in order, and then apply it at your financial institution.
Wow. Autumn, give us a little bit about how you feel about that, about the rule changes, and maybe what some of the applicants need to be looking out, and the do's and don'ts they need to know. You're muted, Autumn.
I'm muted. I've been joking that every rule change seems to come out on like a Friday night or right before a holiday. So we've all been kind of playing catch up, trying to keep up. The good news is, and you all may have heard about this, that there was a recent new law passed called the Flex Act, which has made it much easier for after you get your PPP loan. There are all kinds of rules about how you have to spend it, what you can and cannot spend it on, to be able to be forgiven. So the goal is that this will be a forgivable loan that you don't have to pay back. But you have to follow a lot of rules to get there. So the recent changes have made that much easier. They've made it a longer time to use your funds. So that is really encouraging. I heard about the changes because I came home. We got a PPP loan for my law firm, and my husband said, "I heard you got more money. They're extending." And I said, no, it's not more money. It's just a longer time period to spend it. But yeah, it's been a real shot in the arm for a lot of businesses. And so I'm glad, even though the rule changes have been frustrating because it seems like every day something is different. But I think most small business owners feel like we're moving in the right direction, that these are things that are making it easier to actually do things the right way. I've been keeping a spreadsheet. I'm sure Marcus has recommendations about how you can track. I don't know if we want to get in the weeds that much. but it is important, if you want that to be forgivable, that you're, checking in with your bank, because every bank is going to have their own rules, to making sure that you're following their rules so that it is forgivable.
Well,
Right.
well, Autumn, we definitely have time to get into the weeds.
Right. Right.
So my next question, and maybe you can answer this, or maybe Marcus Shaw, do you have to file it on your taxes? I mean, I think that's a big question for business owners. So, at the end of the year, do you have to claim that? Okay, it's not forgivable, but what about taxes? How does that apply to this these funds in this loan?
So my understanding, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, is that this is not going to be taxed as income. So you're not going to pay income taxes like someone wrote you a check, but you will not be able to deduct those expenses from your business. So when you're figuring out, I've got this revenue, I subtract these expenses to get to my profits, they're not going to be deductible as expenses. So you may see a higher tax bill. It's not quite the same as being taxed on it, but I think, and so I'm curious if we will see some changes in the regulations, because I think a lot of business owners are going to have a big surprise when they get their tax bill if they're not kind of accounting for that right now.
Gotcha.
I guess into going into that, Marcus, give us some of the a way that people may want to look at spending, or how they handle their PPP or their loans once they come in, to make sure they're trying to handle it appropriately.
Great question, Darren. So the PPP loan, the way that it's set up, in order to maximize the economic benefit, i.e. in order to make it forgivable, you have to use at least 60% of that money for payroll. That number used to be 75%, and with the legislation, the Flexibility Act that came out on June 5th, I believe it was, they reduced that number down to 60%. The other money has to be used towards rent or utilities. And when they say compensation, that does include healthcare benefits paid by you, the employer, right? And so it's basically rent, utilities, or payroll, and at least 60% of that has to be payroll in order for that money to be forgiven. They've also extended the window from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, which for some people gives them a little bit more time, perhaps for people that had not hired back folks yet and didn't get the true benefit of the money, essentially the 2.5 months of payroll compensation that they got through the PPP plan. So that's kind of what you want to think about in terms of how you spend the money. You don't want to use the money to go out and spend on marketing, right? And so some people say cash is fungible, right? If I got $50,000 through PPP and I've got $100,000 in the bank and 50 of that's PPP and 50 of it was mine to begin with, how does the IRS know and how does SBA know what I use it for? Well, here's the rule of thumb. If you don't have a relationship with Marcus or somebody like him, with Autumn or somebody like her, or with an accountant or a CPA at any of the great CPA firms in Chattanooga, you're going to be in a world of trouble, because it's going to be difficult for you to document that without using the help of somebody that can walk you through it, right? It doesn't mean it's impossible. The form that's actually been provided by SBA is fairly straightforward, but for people that are running their business every day, that are kind of tied to their QuickBooks or their Excel or their notebook that they're making their journal entries in, translating that over to what you need to get that money forgiven can be a little difficult. And you don't want to get down to the last minute where you've got a couple of days to get the paperwork in so that you write off that $50,000, or don't write off, so that you're forgiven that $50,000. And now you got to rush, because if you don't get it right, you're not going to get forgiven. And then that money is going to start accruing at 1%, right? It's a 1% interest rate on PPP money. It's a 5-year payback period. So it's actually not a bad loan at all, but you want to make sure you take the right steps, working with a banker, an attorney, and a CPA, or some combination of all three, to make sure that the paperwork that you're turning in is correct and accurate and positions you to have that money forgiven.
So,
and the piggyback off, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, and so just to piggyback off what Marcus said as well. So folks who received PPP monies before the Flexibility Act on June 5th was signed into law, you actually have the choice to choose between a 2-year repayment term or a 5-year repayment term. All loans originated on the 5th or after, it's just going to be on a straight 5-year repayment term. So that's pretty important for those who have already received PPP funds and are now approaching the forgiveness timeline. You definitely want to engage your financial institution and let them know that if you want to take advantage of the 5-year payback, some folks may have smaller loan amounts and may not want to stretch out over a 5-year period. So you really need to look at your loan, and if there is something that you have to pay back, ultimately determine which payback period is going to make the most financial sense for your business.
Awesome. I had a question that somebody presented to me. What about businesses that have just started? We think about COVID as being a setback to some businesses, and we don't think about that some businesses are flourishing right now, whether it be security companies or it might be a smaller grocery store or mom and pop shops. Is there anything for those businesses that are just starting and can get help or even assistance, or even just the advice on opening up a business in these tough times?
So are we talking about a business that just started this year, 2020?
Yeah,
Okay.
2020, or within this COVID period.
Gotcha. So a lot of institutions are probably getting a little conservative right now with their lending, just by virtue of where the economy is right now, and so accessing capital through traditional financial institutions may be a little more difficult right now, but that's not to say that it isn't out there. I know, shameless plug, CVFCU, we have the Idea Leap loan program for startups and early stage businesses that we're still actively looking for deals for startups and early stages. And then there are other alternatives. So what I would encourage small businesses to do is to really be intentional about seeking out relationships with bankers and other institutions that are willing to take a chance, because the reality of it is this is not a comfortable environment to lend money in right now. It just isn't. And so small business owners need to also understand that if you need 25,000, you might only get 15. If you need 15, you might only get 10, right? So have a backup plan, right? If you need 25, expect to only get 18. And then what are you going to do to make up the gap? And so those are the kinds of things that I would be thinking about. And to your point, Mark, it certainly helps that if you can demonstrate that you're operating in an industry that is still thriving through this period that we're currently in, because that certainly helps to give the business owner leverage in getting the capital that they need.
Hey, Marcus. One of the questions came through the chat was asking, could a person pay a bonus to an employee, and would that be considered payroll?
Yeah, so I think there's a question about bonuses, particularly for financial institutions in the first round of regulation. The kind of rule of thumb that people were saying was, yes, you can pay bonuses and you can advance variable pay and things like that. But the recommendation was that you would look at that period and really prorate it over the window, right? So over either the 8-week window, or now it seems like, there may be some ability to prorate over the 24-week window. What's unclear to me, and maybe Autumn, I don't know if you have any insight on if there was any changes in the Flex Act around how people are assigning bonuses.
No, what I've seen is that bonuses are okay. But you have to keep in mind that each employee, including the owner, is capped at $100,000 a year, kind of prorated back to that 8-week period. So you can't pay any single employee. It's about $15,000. It's a little bit more than that. But any single person cannot get more than that from your PPP money for it to be forgivable. So just keep that in mind if you've got a high earner on your payroll. But yeah, I've seen bonuses are okay, kind of, would you call it hazard pay, kind of giving people a little bump because these are extraordinary circumstances and people are working hard and exposed to different things than they normally would be, that's all okay.
But it is true,
when you drop.
I think just to be clear, it's really important here that, if you have somebody that's making, let's just call it, $3,000 per pay period or something like that. And then, let's say that's I got to do the math here, but call it a, $60,000, $70,000 job. If you bonus them something that on a full year basis takes them over $100,000, then that portion, the difference, right, would not be eligible for forgiveness.
Correct. But you're limited by that it's about $15,000, almost $16,000 total per employee. So you're not going to be able to get a 60,000 up to 100,000.
Right.
Yeah.
That's definitely good information. Good information. We got a couple of more questions that came in the chat, and it says SBA reached out to us about the EIDL loan. Is getting the EIDL loan rolling into a PPP, is it a viable option, loan for forgiveness?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Marcus.
So yeah, that's an interesting one. So the way the rules have changed on this is as well from time to time. The way we understand it right now is that the EIDL funds will be subtracted out of your PPP proceeds, and so the EIDL monies would have to be paid back because those monies were never intended to be forgiven. And so what we would do is, if let's just say, for instance, you were eligible for $20,000 of PPP money, and you indicated that you got a $10,000 advance through the EIDL, then what we would do is back that out, pay off your EIDL, and then you'd be left with $10,000. So that's certainly something that you'd also want to look at if it makes sense to get both of those loans, because it's only going to make it a little more difficult when it comes time for forgiveness, in terms of figuring out what is or what isn't eligible. I know the SBA has issued some guidance on it, but it hasn't been totally clear on how those are to be handled.
Yeah, and I'll just add, if you are, the EIDL has a much longer payback period, typically, than your 5 years that you're getting on your PPP. So it may make sense, and it's going to be a very low interest rate. It's not 1%, but I think it's 2 or 3. So it may make more sense for you to keep that, pay it off over that longer period, rather than rolling it into the 5-year payback with your PPP, unless it's forgivable. So it's going to be kind of case by case. You got to look at the numbers.
Awesome. This is coming from our Twitter feed. They have a question about, let's see. Oh, this is a question about nonprofits. So of course, you guys explained it well. These are, small businesses with revenue coming in. What are some options for nonprofit businesses if they were affected and, want to get some relief or have some options out there for them?
501c3s are eligible for the PPP program. And I mean, it's been, in the news, there are a number of nonprofits that have applied for this, but, really the same stipulations exist around payroll and the payback period, and the same documentation that you need to provide. The tax document's a little bit different for the nonprofits, but it's the same. You need to have the same rigor of paperwork.
Okay. Awesome.
Hey, Marcus Johnson, someone put in the live in the Q&A, if they wanted to apply for the PPP but didn't have a relationship with a banker, how should they proceed?
So the first thing I would do is proactively reach out to your financial institution, whether it's going into a branch or calling a local office to find out if they're participating in the PPP program, and what the process is in applying for that. Right now, I mean, we are seeing turnaround times sometimes as quick as same day. Like literally, if you show up, all of your documentation is in order. I've had several instances where I put an application in at 10 a.m. in the morning and we'll hear back at 2, right? So, and our traffic has slowed down. I would say that that's probably fairly consistent across the board because, again, there's $130 billion left in this program. So it's not like, there's a ton of small businesses kind of falling over themselves to get it at this point. So you should be able to reach out to your financial institution, talk to a branch manager or a business banker or someone who can give you some detailed information on what the process is. And then maybe try to gauge kind of what the turnaround time is. That's a fair question. Hey, assuming I have all my paperwork in order, how quickly would I hear back? And some folks may be able to give you an answer, some may not. But I can say, for us, and we're all using the same system, by the way. So every institution is going to the same system through the SBA. So we're all kind of in sync there. And so I would say you should be able to get a reasonably quick decision, provided that all of your information, and that's the key part of it, that all of your information is in good order.
I want to highlight and TVFTU has been a great partner for the community in providing access to these type of loans. But there's a lot of folks out there that are saying, well, I don't need it. I don't want to go through kind of doing the paperwork in order to fill it out. What if if I don't get it, I'll feel really bad. That I don't want to expose myself to being that vulnerable. And all of that stuff I think is real. But at the end of the day, the business environment we're in right now is one where liquidity, right, or the ability to have cash available to you is everything, right? Because in Chattanooga, we're in a good position. We're opening back up, but I think the government is telegraphed, federal government, state and local is telegraphed. If things get worse, we could find ourselves back in the winter in the same place that we were in March and April, right? And we don't know if this money will be available at that point in time. We'll be going into election season, which means it's highly unlikely that, Congress is going to move with the expediency that they moved this spring. So if you have cash and you need to use it, right, in order to pay your people, to pay your rent, to pay your utilities, it makes sense to take advantage of this money. Go through the discipline of getting your paperwork together so that you can apply for the forgiveness, and then save the money that you would have used for that to get you through the winter, right? And that's what we're sharing with all of the businesses. I don't care if you're a lemonade stand or you're a law firm, right, like Autumn. I think it's a prudent thing to do, and building relationships with folks like Marcus, whether it's at TVFCU or any of the other community banks, I think is important. I would also note that the community banks are the ones that have really stepped up the most in serving local businesses with access to PPP loans. So a lot of us, have major national banks that we work with because they've got a great website and we can use our debit card anywhere we want with no fee. But when it comes to things like the PPP loan and accessing these relief funds, it highlights the importance of having a relationship with your local bank. And TVFCU has been a great partner.
Man, that is so true. That's one of the things that me and Mark Franklin, we talk about quite often. So Mark Johnson, tell us, like, what's the most common thing people come at you with that they really need to be able to access some of these funds? I don't know if we covering everything we need to with the question, but tell us, how do people come at you with some of the most common things they may need?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've seen a lot of, frankly, is just not having filed taxes yet and not having a Schedule C. And again, that's because the can has been kicked to July 15th. So the majority of us is like, hey, if I don't have to file till July, I'm gonna wait until July, right? And because none of us like to think about potentially having to pay Uncle Sam. So that's understandable. But in times like this, that strategy of waiting kind of comes back to bite you in the rear end, because during the first round, the businesses that were prepared with their 941s, their tax returns, their income statements, all of the documentation that were required stood a better chance of accessing the monies in the first round, and certainly were able to access it early in the second round than the businesses who didn't have everything in order. And so the most common thing is, hey, I haven't filed my taxes yet, you know. And again, that's understandable, but you know, my opinion is, you know, try to file your taxes early on in the season, right? I hope coming out of this, we have a lot of small businesses who will grow and kind of begin to operate as if there's another pandemic right around the corner, right? Because this shows how important it is to have great relationships with your CPAs and your attorneys, but then also be able to access your financial documents at the drop of a dime, right? To be able to get your hands on your information, because literally time is money. And had there not been a second round, you would have had a lot of small businesses left out empty-handed, right? And now we all know the stories that hit the news about the Ruth's Chris and the Lakers and Shake Shacks and all that, which, you know, was a totally different issue in and of itself. But you still had a fair amount of small businesses who got to the front of the line or were able to access the funds because all they had to do was email that PDF with all their financial documents on it. And so time is of the essence. And I would just encourage a lot of small businesses, even though, again, none of us like the idea of potentially having to pay, that you try to take care of your financial orders early in the year. Because think about it this way: if you do have to pay the IRS and you find that out in late February, early March, well, you have 9 or 10 months to plan and prepare for that, as opposed to waiting until April 15th, when now you only have 8, right? And so just from a planning perspective, it makes more sense to really try to be proactive, take care of your financial orders, you know, early on in the year. And then if something that was to happen, you can put your hands on your documents and be the first in line.
Man, good information, Marcus, good information. We got a couple of more questions from the chat. It say, are we still able to apply for SBA loans, not PPP? And they said their bank is not taking SBA loans. And can they set up as an LLC and use PPP money to pay themselves wages?
Autumn, you want to take the last one?
Who wants to take this one? Yeah, I'll take this one. Well, it depends on if you were already operating. So it doesn't matter so much how your company was set up, but to get the PPP money, you had to be operating before February, I think 15. SBA is still lending, so you can get regular SBA loans. What we're hearing about more is these EIDL, the emergency kind of emergency impact or disaster loans. You have to have been impacted by COVID to get that type of loan. So there's lots of different programs out there. It really just depends on what you're looking for your business. If you're looking for a PPP money to pay yourself as an owner, that is possible, and it doesn't really matter what kind of entity structure you have. You just have to be able to show that you show a profit. You can't have, I have had some startups come to me who have said, we're pre-revenue, we haven't actually made any money yet. Can I apply for a PPP loan? And unfortunately, that answer is no. You have to have shown a profit already to get owner's compensation. You don't have to have profit to pay your employees with a PPP loan. That is important for the owner's compensation part of it is a little trickier. So if that person wants to provide more details, I'm happy to try and answer.
I would highlight this also. So we talked about attorneys, bankers, and accountants. If you are an LLC, it is highly important that you have like a payroll processor because it really helps when you're dealing with this, right? If you're an LLC and you can, you know, give yourself a wage, right, a market rate wage, and you don't have to worry about pulling, you know, kind of cash out of the business as a distribution, which is what Autumn's talking about, right, kind of out of the bottom line, then you would be eligible for PPP because you would be an employee of the organization. But you know, whether it's ADP or Paychecks or, you know, Time and Pay, who we use at CoLab, it's incredibly important. It will save you a lot of headache if you have a payroll processor set up for your business or your nonprofit. Because really, they're going to give you a printout, and all of these companies now know what you're asking for. You call up and you tell them you got PPP, and they'll say, well, do you want us to even start taking your payroll directly out of your PPP account, right? A number of folks are opening up separate accounts for PPP and putting their PPP money in a separate account. I think that's a wise thing. But you don't have to take it directly out if you don't want to. You can do all the paperwork on the back end. But if you take it directly out, then you're kind of a step ahead. But having a relationship with a payment processor is also something that we're recommending for a lot of the companies that we work with. And then what was the first question, Darian? I think I had the first part of that, the question.
The question was, could they still apply for an SBA loan that's not PPP?
Oh, yeah. I will say, I think to Autumn's point, people are writing those loans, but there's long lead times. I mean, we've had folks that are saying, it could be 4 months before you get that money. So, they're not going to turn it around the way Marcus is turning around these PPP loans. It's going to be quite some time before you get them because folks are they're spending a lot of time dealing with PPP. So if you think you need an SBA, a traditional small business loan, I would start that process very, very early.
Here's another question in the chat. I think this one is for Autumn. What recommendation do you have for businesses that has not done a great job of keeping paperwork together? Is there a consultant, accounting firm that could help me submit? How about that one?
I keep muting myself. Yes, I think most of the local accounting firms have kind of a bookkeeping department that will help you get your records together if you need that help. And there's also HR consultants. Some of them have bookkeeping that's part of their business. So yes, there's lots of local businesses. I don't have a particular recommendation. Marcus may, since you deal with Marcus Shaw may, pointing down at you. Since you deal with this more than I do. But yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of people that would be happy to help you with that.
Trying to unmute too. We're doing some of that for folks at CoLab as well, just helping them walk through the paperwork and organize that paperwork as well. So if there are businesses that need support and understanding in what they need to bring either for the loan or for the forgiveness, we can help folks with that.
Awesome.
Let me ask you guys a question. With so much we see on TV about rising COVID numbers or whatnot, is it possible what if they shut down the economy again? Would it be for small business owners? That could be devastating. So would it be more money coming out? How would they handle that? Has it even been discussed?
Secretary of Treasury, Stephen Mnuchin, and the administration, at least at this point, has signaled that they don't have any appetite to shut down the economy again. They have been very clear about that. And so, of course, that could change, but based on what's coming out of the administration, they are not going to shut down the economy if we get a second wave of COVID-19. And so if there is a second wave, my opinion is that if there were shutdowns, that would be left up to each individual state to determine what they're going to do about, a second wave of COVID should it hit their particular state. And in which case then relief, if there is any relief, would be at the state level more than likely. The only way, I guess, it would come again from the federal level is if you had the majority of the states shutting down due to a second wave, then maybe. But to Marcus's point earlier, at that point, we'll be, well into the primary. And so who knows what the appetite would be for that. Now, if you had 8 states shutting down due to a second wave, chances are there won't be any help coming. But if you have 38 shutting down due to a second wave, then you may see something else. But I haven't read or heard anything, and you guys can correct me if you heard something different. But based on what I've read and heard, there is no appetite to shut down the economy again if there is a second wave.
This is does anybody else want to harp on that one? So in light of that, with small business owners, so how do you prepare for that? As a business owner, what steps can our business owners, small business owners, the medium-sized business owners take, if any, to put themselves in a position to where, they can, number one, keep their family safe, number two, keep their businesses intact, insured, and make sure that they come out of whatever is to come, on top or even just get through it. Anything on that?
So, I would say, one, again, going back to your financial institution and having a relationship is really important. I mean, this is where having your banker or someone, your CPA on speed dial is going to really come into benefit, because you can have those conversations, not with someone on the other end of an 800 number, but with someone that you can go down to the office and sit across from and say, hey, what if we get a second round? How much more of a deferment can I get on my mortgage payment? Or how much more of a deferment can I get on my commercial loan? Can we restructure it to where I only pay interest only for the next 6 months? But those conversations are much easier to have, and I use easy loosely, but they're much easier to have when you know someone, as opposed to dialing 423-555-800 and hoping to get someone that understands your situation. So I say the first thing would be to be proactive about reaching out to your financial institution. The second thing that I would say is take advantage of this time to reset, right? Really do some self-evaluation on your business, on your financials. Go to CoLab, go to the TSBDC, really be intentional about sitting down with experts who can help you kind of understand, all right, here's how you've been running your business. Maybe you need to cut a certain percentage of your food costs. Maybe you're paying your folks a little too much. And once you run through this PPP money, you may need to adjust your payroll expenses. Maybe you need to look at getting different types of deferment. So I think the other thing is to really, have those tough conversations, really look at yourself, look at your business. If you've been skating by on thin margins, now you're getting exposed, right? And so what do you do to help make sure that you come out on the other side of this situation? There is no easy answer. I mean, this is going to really hurt a lot of small businesses for the foreseeable future. That's not maybe the most comforting thing to hear, but it's the reality of it. But I think the businesses that just hunker down and get super serious about seeking out advice, investing in themselves, will probably stand a better chance of coming out on the other end and being around once this thing leaves the news cycle.
Man. Hey, Marcus, I want to go back to you for this question real quick. Came through the chat. It says, our business remains extremely limited due to the restriction on large gatherings that received the PPP loan in the first round, but is it possible to get additional funding from the program since the forgiveness period was extended?
For Marcus Shaw or Marcus Johnson?
Either one of y'all that can answer it. I was thinking Marcus Johnson, since he might know about the extension of the loans.
Yeah, so there is, at this point, not an opportunity to get additional funding. It was a one-shot deal. And so at this particular point in time, there is not an opportunity to go back and get additional monies.
There was another question on here in the chat. I know you cannot go into detail, but the EIDL is for people affected. Can you describe that a bit better and what the difference between this and the SBA loan is?
So the EIDL is an SBA loan. It's a specific type of SBA loan that's designated for COVID-19 impact, right? And so it's different than some of the other SBA loans that exist out there that are always available. The terms are a little different. The underwriting process was supposed to be faster, right? With the intent to get the money into people's hands quickly. But what we've talked about at CoLab was using, really a stair-step approach, right? And I think the city of Chattanooga did a really good job on, getting smaller but meaningful pieces of money into people's hands fast. Then the PPP was kind of behind that, and that could get you, through days kind of 0 through 30. And the EIDL are larger amounts of money, which really should get you, through. I would say we look at it like a 6-month window, right? If it can kind of get you through 180 days of operation, and hopefully we're in a better place on the other side of that. But it is an SBA loan, and you do apply to that program directly through the SBA. The good folks, Sarah Madsen and Lynn Chestnut over at TSBDC, have been doing a great job with helping walk people through that process, as opposed to the PPP program, where you actually apply to the PPP program through a financial institution like TVFCU.
Thank you for that, Marcus.
Can I add one thing I just wanted to say about
go ahead.
Where companies should be thinking about? I mean, you have got to go out, if you're a company, a small business, you got to build a relationship with an attorney, accountant, a banker, and if you don't have one, a payment processor. And, you got to think about, how can I build cash, right? Cash is king. The second thing I would think about is, strategically, are there things that you can do to make your business a little more resilient? If you've got, a lease coming up on a 4,000 square foot area, and you can do just fine on 1,500 square feet and cut that rental rate down, cut it down, right? Don't wait, do it immediately, right? If there's a business that you all do really, work closely together, or maybe there's some cost sharing that you can do, think about, everything from working on a joint venture to, does it make sense for you to merge and work well with somebody, right? If you've got kind of restaurants that are next to each other, and, maybe there's a way that you can work together to cut down some of your fixed costs, then that makes sense too. And then I think, to Marcus's point again, really rationalize, how many people do you need to keep the business going? But you got to do those things right away. And that's one of the big things we're working with people to do, is to understand, what does their business look like in a great scenario, in an okay scenario, and a bad scenario, and how do you get ready to prepare yourself for all three of those?
That's great information. That is great information. Autumn, I know you probably hear a lot about, I know you don't help a lot of businesses kind of keep their direction throughout this process. What's some of the most overwhelming information that you've dealt with throughout this process? And just kind of give us some insight on some of the things you've dealt with and information if others need to know.
Yeah, one thing we've helped a lot of our clients through, and there's been a lot of questions around, is, I was planning to host a conference and now I can't because gatherings are not allowed. And maybe I had a contract with the event venue. Like, can I get out of that contract? So we've been working a lot with, are we able to reschedule? Maybe we can just kick that down the road. Working with, maybe a business had agreed to provide a certain product, but they were going to import it, and now the ships are not coming, and so they can't get the product to be able to do their job. So that's been challenging. It's just helping businesses navigate, all of those, making sure they're meeting their obligations and not paying for things that they can't get or can't use. That's been tough. But I will say, I have not seen a lot of scenarios where, like in the example where you had to cancel an event, where we couldn't work out something that was, everybody takes a hit, but nobody takes the whole hit. People have been pretty accommodating. So that's been good to see. I think there will be lawsuits for years and years over this, but thankfully for most of my clients, we've been able to work things out.
It's interesting that you bring that point up, Autumn. How important is it for a business to have contracts in place?
Super important.
Yeah, let's talk about that and what what your firm does, to help businesses have that in place, so when things like this come up, they're covered.
Yeah, I would say, especially if your business is down a little bit and you're finding yourself with a little breathing room, this is a great time, Marcus Shaw and Marcus Johnson were both talking about, auditing your financials, looking at all of that, making sure that's all in order. It's also a great time to look at your contracts. And, most of us we do it once and then we put it in a drawer and we never look at it again. We might use it a lot. But it's a good time to read through that and say, have I changed things in how I'm doing business? Or do I have that force majeure or, act of God clause that allows me to kind of have some flexibility if something like this happens that none of us could have predicted 6 months ago. So yeah, it's super important. And, making sure your contract should really, in my opinion, I'm not a jerk, your contract should really protect both sides. So, taking a look at your contract, making sure it still feels good with the way that you're doing business. I think it's super, super important.
Hey, I just want to add that, to everyone's point, don't be afraid to ask for help, to ask for some forgiveness or an extension. There was a story that came out maybe a week or so ago, maybe a little while longer, where Gap was being sued by Simon Properties for like $70 million in back rent, right? And they essentially released a statement that says, hey, we ain't got it. And hopefully you guys will work with us, right? And so the point is that you have a lot of big companies who are asking for some relief, some forgiveness, and not from the government, but from their landlords and from their bankers, right? And so if Gap and Walmart and some of these other places don't mind asking for some help, no one on this call should think that there is any shame in going to their banker, going to their attorney, going to whomever they owe, and just say, hey, what can you do to help me? Because at the end of the day, we're all feeling it, and very few people are still flying above the clouds right now. I think everybody on some level is needing some assistance, or at least the majority of folks. And so if a company like Gap can, essentially let's say, hey, we ain't got it, we'll give it to you when we get it, then certainly everyone on this call should be willing to go to those who they owe and see if they can work something out. And if you can't, because sometimes the answer is just going to be, hey, no, we've extended the best that we can, then you just got to prioritize, make some tough decisions. I had a customer ask me the other day, what's the impact on a credit score if you get reported, 30 days past due on your mortgage or your car payment? Obviously, it's going to go down. There's no real way to say exactly it's going to go down by X number of points. But my point to that person was, look, you're going to take a short-term hit, right? If you don't have it, you don't have it. I certainly wouldn't suggest going and using a credit card to go and pay something else and kind of getting into that cycle. But I would focus on the long-term goal, right? Even if you get 30 days, 45 days behind on something, but you're trying to make a payment, try to pay something, try to make the effort. If your commercial loan payment is, $800 a month and your institution has said, hey, look, we can't help you anymore, then say, okay, well, hey, that's fine. All I can afford to pay you is $250 right now, right? And make some sort of effort to show people that you're at least trying. And I wouldn't get too discouraged. And I know it may be easier said than done, but I wouldn't get too discouraged about getting a hit on your credit score or this, that, and the third, because once you bounce back, those things will recover, right? Once you kind of get on the better side of this situation, once we all get on the better side of it, your credit score will recover, your relationship with your institution will hopefully recover. If not, find somewhere else to bank. And that's the other thing, is that we all still have choices, right? So if your institution, if you don't think that they're making a good faith effort to work with you, then when you do get back on your feet, maybe you go shopping, and you find an institution that you think will be willing to work with you. So I just want to throw that out there because, I'm sure there are a lot of folks who are concerned about, getting behind on bills. Pay your mortgage first, and then everything else, you just kind of get in line wherever it is. That's really the reality of it.
Right. Very encouraging words, Marcus. We appreciate that, man. And I appreciate all of the panel guests for taking the time to be on behalf of Chattanooga Business Elite. And I'm sure Darian with the Chattanooga area chambers agrees with me. We appreciate the insight and you guys taking your time out today to speak about this. It starts with these conversations, and I think it's important that, you know, we come together and we have these, especially in this time of need. But I want to make sure that, you know, we start doing this after, you know, if when we get through with this. So Darren, I appreciate you.
No doubt, man. No doubt. I want to thank all of you guys for coming on. I really want to give all of you just kind of one last rundown on any kind of techniques or tips or advice you want to leave with the viewers here. So I'm gonna start with Marcus Shaw. Anything you want to leave with the people that's watching this Zoom meeting?
I mean, cash is king and relationships rule, and that's the takeaway. Find an accountant, an attorney, you know, a banker, and a payment processor. Let them know where you are. Work with them to get through the next 6 months. Awesome. And CoLab's here to help.
Good to know. Good to know. What about you, Autumn?
Yeah, I've been encouraging the people we work with to really take this as a time to reset. As we talked about, look at your whole business. Are there some opportunities maybe that have come up that you didn't have time to focus on and now you do? And so you can shore things up so that when things come back, you're kind of ready to roll.
Right. Marcus Johnson, do you want to give the people your information if they need to contact you, or give them a way to contact you about the banking piece? And same with you, Marcus Shaw, with CoLab, and Autumn, you also. But do you want to give the people some information to be able to contact you all?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So my direct number is 423-355-1398. And my email address is Marcus, MARCUS, .Johnson, JOHNSON, @tvfcu.com. I'll be more than happy to help you. And I don't have all the answers, but I'll certainly search for them. And I would, you know, my final thought, man, is just, you know, and this may sound sappy, man, but just try to stay encouraged. I mean, you know, mental health during this time is important. We know that a lot of Black-owned businesses are getting beat up right now. And we also know that finances can weigh on all of us in these times. And so I know that you know, hope and all those things don't keep folks from calling you and asking you for payment. But I think it's of the utmost importance that we all, but particularly small business owners who don't have a biweekly or a monthly check, to really try to find whatever your routine is that you use to keep yourself encouraged, keep yourself in a good mental space, because you can't operate in this environment if you are depressed, or if you're constantly thinking about the problems and the issues that you're facing. It's just not going to be possible. So I would just encourage everyone to try your best to stay in a good mental space and understand that this too will definitely pass.
Go ahead, Autumn. I want to thank all of you guys for attending again. Mark, you want to say anything before you're ready to close out?
No, I'm good. Again, I appreciate everybody for coming on. Appreciate everybody for logging on and viewing. And I hope everybody got some useful, impactful information that they can take home and really, you know, think about and absorb. So thank you.
But definitely, this will not be the last time we all meet. I don't know if all of you guys know I have an event coming up this Friday, Diversify. It's on Juneteenth. It's going to be a great event. I got Dr. Emmanuel Pastor coming in to speak. We got some great breakout sessions that start at 8 a.m. So now I send the link to all the panelists as well, to the panelists and to the attendees. But thank you guys again. Keep this conversation going. We're going to help people the best we can. Till next time.
Cool.
See you.
All right.
Have a good night, everyone.
All right.
Thanks.
Good night.